This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, good. All right, so let us get started. First of all, welcome everybody. Good to see everybody here. Good. Everybody know. And what is your name? Rivka. Welcome, Rivka. Okay, good to have you on board with us. Good. Okay, everyone else, I know. Good. Okay, so today's topic is the age of the universe. Okay, I figured with Bereshit, the starting of the Torah, and God's account, the Torah's account of creation, and we have the account of science's account of what they don't call creation, they call beginning, right, which would be the Big Bang, right? And there is a tremendous age discrepancy. According to science, the world is 15 plus billion years old. And according to our tradition, we are the year 5784, 5,784. 85, right. Thank you. It's a new year. I stand corrected. Thank you, doctor. That is correct. So 5785. But even with that correction, we're still pretty far from the 15 billion, right? 57, 84, 85, we're still pretty far from the 15 billion. So how do people like ourselves who believe in the divinity, the authenticity of Torah, but also believe science, right? Not that everything about science is 100% true, but that science, for the most part, when it's being done correctly, right, there'll always be changes, and we laugh at what the scientists thought 50 years ago, and 50 years from now, they'll laugh at what the scientists think today. But nevertheless, there are certain basics of science that are not going to be changing drastically. I always like to point out that it used to be that science, when I was in high school, that was back in the 1800s. So then science, I was taught, I remember sitting in yeshiva high school, and the science teacher saying to us as follows: listen, I don't know what your rabbis are tell you in the morning, and that's not my area, but the world, constant state theory. The world has always existed. That's what I was taught in high school. I think that was the accepted scientific view at that time. Constant state theory. Of course, since then, science has moved closer to Genesis, and they recognize that the first word of the Torah, Bereshit, in the beginning, is true. There was a beginning, right? And they refer to that as the Big Bang, right? We say that in addition to the Big Bang, there were the next two words of the Torah, which is there was you'll pardon me, a Big Banger, right? Which is Bereshit bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created. So science has come around to a certain degree in terms of, yes, there was a beginning, and it's a work in progress. So I laid out over here three approaches. If there is an apparent clash between science and Torah, there are three basic approaches to deal with this. Number one, maybe we have misunderstood the science. That's certainly a possibility. We must never regard science as an absolute against which Torah must be made to fit. Much, although probably not all, of 20th century science will be overturned by the end of the 21st century. So science is taking the evidence that we have, taking our understanding of that evidence, and drawing conclusions. Torah is getting the blueprint and understanding how things were made, and then going forward, how things then move forward from that. There will always be perfect coordination between true, correct science and a true, correct understanding of Torah. But that's where the variables will come in. But if God is telling us this is truth, and science is working backwards and is uncovering and deciphering and decoding truth, then truth will equal truth. Where do we have these discrepancies? Number one, if we misunderstand the science or science misunderstood. Number two, maybe we have misunderstood the Torah, right? Assume that Torah is much more sophisticated than you think. Torah exists on many, many different levels. Three,
Rabbi, we see that in all the proportion over centuries.
Correct.
Everybody has their own opinion.
Correct. Shivim panim the Torah, we say. There are 70 facets to the Torah. And more broadly, there is pardes, right, which stands for pshat, the simple understanding, the remez, the hint, the drash, that which we can expound, the sod, the secrets behind it. So Torah exists on many different levels. Thirdly, maybe they are both correct, but are looking at different questions. This is something that Rabbi Sachs writes about very often. Science is how, Torah is why. Okay? They are working on different levels of reality. There is a very important Rambam that we'll quote here in Moreh Nevuchim 225. The Rambam entirely rejects Kadmat Ha'olam, which was the constant state theory that I was taught by my science teacher in Chafetz Chaim High School. And he writes at length in Moreh Nevuchim 225, disproving it. So he's dealing with Aristotle mostly, and he is saying that logically, scientifically, astronomically, it doesn't make sense. However, so he says, from a science point of view, to say the world always existed does not make sense. But then he says as follows. He also writes, quote, it's almost a quote. It was written in Arabic, right? Moreh Nevuchim. So it's not I'm not going to give you a full quote in my brush on my Arabic over here. But the translation is as follows. If, however, we accept the eternity of the universe in accordance with Plato, meaning if we would come around to realize that science proves that, yes, it's clear the world always existed, we would not be in opposition to the fundamental principles of our religion. Really? The Torah says, Bereshit bara, in the beginning God created. So how would a constant state universe not be in contradiction? The scripture might have been explained accordingly, and many expressions might have been found in the Bible and other writings which would confirm and support this theory. But there's in other words, and over there he goes more in depth, right? God's eyes, God's ears, God's arm, God's finger, all explicit verses in the Torah. How do we understand each and every single one of those psukim verses which give a human physical characteristic to God?
So that would be the constant state, that all those fingers.
No. I'm asking a different question. When we come to the psukim that say God's outstretched arm, so do we see this arm coming out of heaven? Is that how we understand that? No, it's anthropomorphism, which means we give human characteristics to a non-human in order to put it into our realm of understanding, l'saber et ha'ozen, right? In order to make our ears be able to understand it. We only work within the framework of our experiences. Ask someone to draw a being from outer space. So what will it be? It'll be a very distorted human or animal. That's what it'll be. We always are working within our realm of experience, our realm of existence. And therefore, the Rambam says, all of these human attributes that we give to God, all those psukim, we say it's not meant to be taken literally. So too, the Rambam said, if necessary, we would understand that the creation story is not meant to be taken literally. But we don't have to do that. But there's no necessity for this expedient as long as the theory has not been proved. And on the contrary, science has come around to there was our ever-expanding universe, which we'll come back to a little bit later on, that is proof that there was a beginning and we're still working our way out from that ever-expanding beginning. But that's very important. This Rambam, to me, is very, very important, which means if science, indisputable science, will prove something, then we work with that. We work within that, and we understand our Torah accordingly. But there's no reason, he says, to reshuffle the deck over here because it's not true and that the world always existed, and science has come around to that fact. Okay, let's go now to the issue of today. The Torah states that Adam Harishon, right? Not Harrison, no relation to George. Adam Harishon was created 5779 years ago, or this has been a little while ago, right? We'll say 5785. Thank you again. And the creation of the rest of the universe took 6 days before that. Thus, the age of the universe is 5785 plus 6 days. Scientists are unanimous. The universe is much older than that. Estimates vary between 10 and 20 billion years. This state is not arrived at through a theoretical construct, but by observable evidence from a variety of sources, which all validate this estimate. When you have a number of different ways of proving, and they all seem to come to the same conclusion, then that seems to be true. Yes, Reb Shlomo.
But don't we say that what was considered a day at that time is not?
Okay.
Okay.
So Reb Shlomo was touching on a point that who says the day was our day? Now, taking into account that the sun and moon, right, which is how we measure our days, was only going further into the creation story. That validates that it's not simply a day. But many commentators, classic Ramban, will say that we're talking about a 24-hour period. Okay? So the 5785 plus 6 days is not going to get us anywhere near the billions we need to hit. Okay. Let's just go through this quickly. The evidence includes, meaning how does science reach their conclusions? And I'm no scientist, so anybody wants to correct me or add to this, they can. But basically, the observable existence of galaxies billions of light years away, assuming the constancy of the speed of light, these galaxies existed billions of years ago. It's really fascinating when you're walking along. I love doing this at night, and you see a star. You think you see a star. You don't see a star. You see the light that star emitted. Chances are that star no longer exists. Right? Chances are that star no longer exists. But you're seeing the light that it emitted however many millions, billions, light years ago. And it's finally coming to arriving at Ciner's retina as I'm walking home. This just in, right? But it was sent perhaps millions of years ago, and the sender of that light might no longer exist. Okay. Number 2, right? But again, assuming the constancy of the speed of light, these galaxies existed billions of years ago. Number 2, radioactive dating of elements found in rocks. When applied to rocks on the surface of the earth, the oldest rocks are about 3.8 billion years old. When applied to meteorites, the oldest are 4.56. This is understood to be the age of the solar system. So radioactive dating sees how things break down over a period of time, sees how broken down it is, and does the math going back and say, okay, this is where it started. Number 3, measuring the luminosity of an old star clusters gives ages of around 12 billion years. Number 4, on a more theoretical basis, the observable expansion of the universe, seen by red shift in the more distant stars, can be extrapolated using the Hubble constant to a point of the original Big Bang about 15 billion years ago. Number 6, yeah, it should be 5. Different errors evident from rock strata which show that different types of species existed at different times. Fossils of aquatic creatures, water creatures, in today's mountain ranges. Right? How'd they get up over there? Different dinosaurs at different times. Okay. So we're going to go through, I'm going to present 3 different approaches. Okay? Now, I'm going to share with you how I personally, as a Torah believing person and also a person who accepts science for the most part, how I deal with this. And that is, well, a story that I like to tell is in Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust. I tell a story of a certain rabbi after the Holocaust. And someone said to the rabbi, "Rabbi, don't you have questions?" And the rabbi said, "Ooh, do I have questions? I got more questions than you can even imagine. But I also know that God has answers. And I'm concerned if I'm going to ask these questions too stridently, God's going to say, come here, and I'll answer you. Come here, my sweet child, and I'll give you the answers. So I'm willing to wait. I'll ask the question, I'll get the answers after 120 years, as we say, when the time comes. So for myself also, when it comes to something like this, I don't feel I need to know, prove to me that this is the answer, that this is the solution, this is the resolution. As long as, for me, I'm a simple guy. As long as there are different possibilities, I'm fine. I'm comfortable. What is the exact correct one or what blend? In due time. I'll wait till 120 years and then I'll get all of my answers. I'm not in a major rush. Approach number 1. The world was made looking old, or I think a better way to phrase that is a mature world was created. This accepts the scientific analysis, but claims that Hashem made the world to look in an adult state, whereas in fact it is only the 57 ... years old. Okay, before we see number 3, let's go down to number 4 for a moment. Okay, then we'll come back to the Lubavitcher Rebbe in number 3. The Gemara says, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, number 4, the Amar Rabbi Yisroel ben Levi, Kol Maaseh Bereshit B'Kol Matan Nivra'u. The whole act of creation, the whole creation world, B'Kol Matan Nivra'u, in full stature, it was created. Meaning there's a pasuk, a verse in Tehillim and Psalms about the shore, Keren Mafris, I think is how it's described. Now, Keren is the horn. Peras is the hoofs. Keren Mafris means, at the time of creation, its horns preceded its hoofs. Meaning it came out and this full, mature, with its horns, antlers, whatever we'll say, along with the hoofs. The world was created. The trees were mature trees. So if you were to open up one of those trees and count the rings, you would say, yes, this is a 647-year-old tree. And based on the rings, that is correct. However, that 647-year-old tree was created at that moment. So on one hand, it's 647 years old. On the other hand, it is newly created. Let's see number 5, then we'll double back to Lubavitcher Rebbe. Vayitzar Hashem Elokim et Adam afar min adamah. The pasuk says in Bereshit, God created humankind afar min adamah. Afar normally means afar dust min adamah. The Medrash says soil. Yeah. Afar, Rabbi Bar Shimon Omer, Ofer. Olam al miliato nivra, Amar Shimon, Af Chava al miliata nivrait, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Adam v'Chava kibnei esrim shana nivra'u. The Medrash sees the word Afar as Ofer, which means a young adult. That Adam and Chava were created as adults, age 20.
I don't know if it was like a gazelle, some type of animal.
I don't think it is. I don't think it is.
Deer.
Yeah, that's what it says. Baby deer.
But not gazelle. Gazelle is not allowed.
So the world was created in its mature state. Adam and Chava were created in a mature state. And therefore, right, so the world, the people, the animals, the vegetation, the trees, and the soil, everything would be, a world would be in a mature state. Why would God need to put things into the ground according to this? Right? Well, actually, all of our oil, where does our oil come from? I don't know, it comes from dinosaur necessarily, but fossilized, right? That's where the oil comes from. So God would create a mature world. Is this done to trick us? No, I don't think so. This is done according to this approach. The world was created, everything in this mature state. Let's see Lubavitcher Rebbe, what he has to write on this. The argument from the discovery of fossils is by no means conclusive evidence of the great antiquity of the earth for the following reasons. And we'll see one of the last sources, Tiferes Yisroel. See, he says that he got the greatest chizuk, the greatest strengthening of his faith from the discovery of these fossils, right? But we'll get there soon. Lubavitcher Rebbe writes, A, in view of the unknown conditions which existed in prehistoric times, conditions of atmospheric pressures, temperatures, radioactivity, unknown catalyzers, etc., conditions which could have caused reactions and changes of an entirely different nature and tempo from those known under the present day orderly processes of nature. So one cannot exclude the possibility that dinosaurs existed 5,722 years ago and became fossilized under terrific natural cataclysms in the course of a few years rather than in millions of years, since we have no conceivable measurements or criteria of calculations under those unknown conditions. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe's approach, right, it's not one that resonates so much with me, but that the barometers, the measuring sticks of science are all assuming a certain constancy. And who's to say there was this consistent constancy at play, right? The world might have gone through, and there are those that say by the flood, the world went through serious changes. B, even assuming that the period of time which the Torah allows for the age of the world is definitely too short for fossilization, we can still readily accept the possibility that God created ready fossils, bones or skeletons, for reasons best known to him. I mentioned a possibility could be that we have the oil reserves to drive our cars to come to Lunch and Learn. Just so he could create ready living organisms, a complete man, and such ready products as oil, coal, or diamonds without any evolutionary process. As for the question, if it be true as above, why did God have to create fossils in the first place? The answer is simple. We cannot know the reason why God chose this manner of creation in preference to another. And whatever theory of creation is accepted, the question will always remain unanswered. The question, why create a fossil, is no more valid than the question, why create an atom? Meaning, we look at the world, and there are all of these factors, components of the world. Why like this and not like that? Certainly, such a question cannot serve as a sound argument, much less as a logical basis for the evolutionary theory. Okay, so approach number one is that it was a mature world. And therefore, the same way, if I were to create a tree, a mature tree, count the rings, it's 500 years old, but it's 1 day old. So therefore, so too, we're looking at a mature world on the day of creation. So any means of measuring is not going to be accurate. I like this approach number two.
Rabbi, real quick.
Yes, Dov.
Why Hashem wants to create man to live 1,000 years?
Are you asking me to answer that? Do you want to give a class on that?
I'm just asking you.
Yeah, that goes into what the Rabbi had said, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Approach number two. The days of creation ran at a different speed. The 6 days are real 6 days and 15 billion years at the same time. Now, this sounds like voodoo, but actually, this is science. This is Einstein. This is time, relativity of time. Let's hear. This approach is adopted by Shimon Schwab and the Leshem, was great Kabbalists. It proposes that before the creation of man, on day 6, the world did not run at the same pace. In fact, although, as Steve, you brought up, the 6 days creation were indeed 6 24-hour periods, the world ran at such a speed as would take billions of years by our current reckoning. As such, the world is 5,700 ... years old, but squeezed a lot into the first 6 days. Let's hear this. Building on this analysis, Dr. Gerald Schroeder has produced a theory based on the theory of relativity, that the passage of time will differ depending on velocity and gravity, right? Science, I don't know if it was never done, but if theoretically you'd have these identical twins, and one would be living here on Earth, the other one would be going up into space, orbiting around the Earth, right? When it lands, they're going to be very different ages. The one orbiting Earth at the speed, velocity, will be older, biologically older than the one down here. But let's hear it in a way we can understand it very simply. Day 1, and not a first day, seeing time from the beginning. The fact that the Bible tells us there is evening and morning, day 1, comes to teach us from a biblical perspective, from near the beginning, looking forward. We look back in time and say the universe is 15 billion years old. But as every scientist knows, when we say the universe is 15 billion years old, there's another half of the sentence. The universe is 15 billion years old as seen from the time, space, coordinates of the Earth. The key is that the Torah looks forward in time from very different time-space coordinates when the universe was small. Since then, the universe has expanded out. Space stretches, and that stretching of space totally changes the perception of time. Imagine going back billions of years, beginning of time, and now pretend at that beginning, when time gropes old, there is an intelligent community. Of course, there wasn't. Imagine they have a laser, and that laser is going to shoot out a blast of light every second. Every second, there's this pulse of light. On each pulse of light, the following formation is printed. I'm sending you a pulse every second. Billions of years later, far down, way far down the timeline, we here on Earth have a big satellite dish antenna, and we perceive that pulse of light, and it says, I'm sending you a pulse every second. Light travels 186,000 miles per second. So that's pretty fast. So at the beginning, the two light pulses are separated by a second of travel, or 186,000 miles. Now they travel through space for billions of years until they reach the Earth. But is the universe static? The universe is always expanding. The universe expands by space stretching. So as these pulses travel through space, space is stretching. What happens to those pulses? The space between them is also stretching because they have to travel that much more of a distance. I'm a quarterback. I can throw a great pass for 20 yards. Great. But then my wide receiver goes out 40 yards. All of a sudden, right, it's going to have to go that much further to get to him. Billions of years later, when the first pulse arrives, we read, I'm sending you a pulse every second. A mesmer out of space. You call your friends, wait for the next pulse to arrive. Does it arrive a second later? No. A year later? Maybe not. Maybe billions of years later. Because it's traveling at the same speed, but the distance getting to us here on Earth is forever getting further and further and further. Let's go do the math first, okay? The amount of time this pulse of light has traveled through space will determine the amount of space and space stretching that has occurred. So how much space and how much time will be between the arrival of the pulses? That, Professor Schroeder writes, is standard cosmology. Today, 15 billion years or 6 days, we look back in time and we see approximately 15 billion years of history. Looking forward, when the universe is very small, at the time of the Big Bang, at the time of that creation, it was billions of times smaller than it is. The Torah says 6 days, measuring time from when they're sending out those pulses. We say 15 billion years, measuring the time of when those pulses reach us. And we'll see the math soon. In truth, they both may be correct. What's exciting about the last few years in cosmology is we now have quantified the data to know the relationship of the view of time from the beginning of stable matter relative to the view of time today. It is not science fiction any longer. Doesn't physics textbooks all bring the same number? The general relation between nucleosynthesis, that time near the beginning at the threshold energy of protons and neutrons when matter formed, and time today is a million. 12 zeros after it. So then, I know, add 3 zeros to a million, you got yourself a billion. All right, so a million means that's a trillion? I think so. So when a view from the beginning looks forward, says, I'm sending you a pulse every second, would we see a pulse every second? No, we'd see it today. We'd see it every million seconds, because that's the stretching effect of the expansion of the universe. So where is our clock? Where is the Torah's clock? The 5.5 days of Genesis are not, did I skip? The Talmud tells us that the soul of Adam was created 5.5 days after the beginning of the 6 days. That is a half day before the termination of the 6th day. At that moment, the cosmic calendar ceases and an earth-based calendar begins. First, it is God time, universe time, being measured from that point of creation, that space, whatever we'll call that. Once Adam enters the world, now the clock moves on to earth. At that moment, the cosmic calendar ceases and an earth-based calendar starts. How would we see those days stretched by a million million? 5.5 days times a million million gives us 5.5 million million days. Dividing that by 365 days in a year, that comes out to be 15 billion years. Now it's going to be changing, right? Meaning it has to be changing. Meaning at first, right, the space is doubling, right? When it goes from 1 to 2, it doubled. Right? When it goes from 2 to 3, it hasn't doubled. It's gone up 50%. 3 to 4, it's only been 33%. 4 to 5, only 25%. And so on and so on. So originally, it's expanding at a much greater rate than it is the further you go out from there. Okay? So, considering the many approximations and the Bible works within only 6 periods of time, the agreement to within a few percent is extraordinary. The universe is billions of years old from one perspective, and a mere 6 days old from another, and both are correct. Do a little more math, and I'll take your question, Steve. And if you wanted to look up any of Professor Schroeder's books, actually, he not only does what we're going to do here today, but he actually links the fossil records that we have of when science says different species made their way evolutionary into the world. So that also does align. But that you'll have to see some of his own writing. The 5.5 days of Genesis are not of equal duration. Each time the universe doubles in size, the perception of time halves as we project that time back toward the beginning of the universe. The rate of doubling, that is the fractional rate of change, is very rapid, as I said before at the beginning, and decreases with time simply because as the universe gets larger and larger, even though the actual rate of expansion is constant, it takes longer and longer for the overall size to double. Because of this, the earliest of the 6 days have most of the 15 billion years sequestered with them. For the duration of each day and the details of how that matches with the measured history of the universe, see the science of God. He gives a beautiful example, and then we'll take a look at the days and the years. Similar to drawing a 1-inch line on a deflated balloon. You measure that line, how long is it? Exactly 1 inch. When the balloon is gradually inflated, that same line might be 5, 10, then 20 centimeters, inches, whatever it is long. Using the scientific calculation for the expansion of the universe, and gravitational forces, Dr. Schroeder comes to the following. Day 1, 24 hours, 8 billion years. Day 2, 24 hours, 4 billion years. Day 3, 2 billion years. Day 4, 1. Day 5, a half. Day 6, a quarter. Each one having its way along, bring us to the 15.75 billion years. So time is relative. That's what science says. Time is relative. Where are you measuring it from? And in this ever-expanding universe, it's going to be that it will take this billion years for that next pulse of light that was sent out 1 second later. It'll take another billion years till the next one comes to us. That is approach number 2. Yes, Steve.
At the beginning, we introduced the concept of l'saber ha'ozen, that the Torah speaks in the language that we are familiar with and that we understand. So this approach seems to have dropped that idea, because if it's talking about days, but really what it means is from the perception of the beginning of the universe, this is not what we're used to thinking
Correct.
about.
Correct. This is not using borrowed terms. This is precise terms. 24 hours.
But we're saying that the Torah does both, because you started with
The Torah is
anthropomorphism, saying it's
the Torah is precise, and at times the Torah will use anthropomorphism. We're not going to say it's always using anthropomorphism, right? So this approach is the Torah said exactly 6 days, and those exact 6 days actually, once the clock is moved to here, that measures 15 something billion years.
It's not even a question of being precise, because again, it's a question of perspective. So really what we're saying is the Torah is going to speak not in our terms, but in its terms.
It's not using an earthly clock until humankind was created. That's what it's saying. Yeah. Approach number 3. There were worlds prior to our creation. This approach is adopted by Rav Aryeh Kaplan. It brings from classical source to show that the present world may be, whatever, when he wrote it, 577 years old, but there were billions of years prior worlds before ours.
Doesn't science say that there were various creations that were destroyed?
Yes. Science, well, actually, that's what I mentioned before. We'll see at the very end. Tiferes Yisroel, one of the classic commentators on the Mishnah. So in the 1800s, when they were first discovering these fossils, see, some Jews got all nervous. What does this mean? He got all excited. This is fantastic, he said. This is proof to the Midrashim that there were earlier iterations of the world that were destroyed before our present iteration. And here we're finding evidence of that. We're finding the remains of those iterations. Let's hear. Amar Rab Yehuda Bar Simon, Yehi Erev, Yehi Boker, Ein Ketiv Kan. The Torah does not say it was evening, it was morning. Rather, what does it say? Va Yehi Erev. And it was evening. And it was morning. I understand day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, you have and. Why on day 1 do you have Vayihi? And it was Erev. And it was Boker. He says, Mikan Shaya Seder Zmanim Kodem Lechein. There were these errors of time prior to this. And it was evening and night, the first day of this present iteration that the Torah is telling us about. Amar Bava Melamed, we learn. Shayabore Olamot Umacharivan. Worlds were created and were destroyed. Ad Shebara et Elu, until our present iteration was created. Amar Dain Hanayanli, Yaton Lo Hanayanli. This one I want, the others no. Amra Pinchas Taimid Ravavo Vayar Elokim et Kol Asher Asa V'Hinei Tov Ma'od. After the creation here, it says God said it was not just good, but mucho gudo, tov ma'od, dain hanayon li. This I want, yaton lo hanayon li. So vayihi erev vayiboker, we have this medrash idea, the sages, that well before there were any dinosaurs, this is not apologetics. This is well before science had any inkling of all that which was hidden under the crust of our earth, already saying that the world had many iterations. Sheva, number 12, Sheva Shabbatot Shanim, Haim Sheva Shmitot, The 7 sabbatical cycles, the 7 remas. This is a hint. Ki chadesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu olamo sheva pa'amim. There'll be, according to some, 7 iterations of this world. B'chol shmita pa'amachat. Chol acha mehen tieh tosevet tova v'ashbar bracha mishelefaneha. Each one will be an improvement over that which had preceded it. Ki v'talot yom hashvi yishaer charuv me'aneshamot ki yachzir otan v'achar ken ya'olam chadash lashpia neshamot chadashot below Yetzer Hara, below Zuama V'Tuma. Ultimately, there'll be a creation of neshamot chadashot, of new souls, without this Yetzer Hara, without this inclination to do evil, without this impurity. Ushnat memtet atzma hishmita v'achareha hayovel. And then comes the Jubilee year, the 50th year. The Medrash says that's not just talking about the regular Shemitah Jubilee cycles, that's talking about the cycles the world will go through. An idea also found in the Ramban, Rabachia, the Rakanati, that's what is quoted, adopts the concept of recurring cycles of creation. Eov, Job, we have both in Hebrew and English. Hakimei enosh yamecha, imshinotecha kiyemei gaver, source number 13. Are your days the days of a mortal? Are your years the years of a man? And then let's just do this, and then we'll take Janet and then Steve. Again, this is the verse all about the prehistoric man. Ufiania daiti, otam b'nei hadam, those prehistoric humans, shayu ba'olam kadum, which existed in prehistoric times, shenikrain para, par adamitin, I don't know, pre-Adamite. Rachalamar, Habnei Adam shayu ba'olam kodem briut Adam Arishon hachshavi. That was the people that existed before the present Adam was created. Hain, they are the 974 generations that the sages speak about. Sheniskru, that's mentioned in the Talmud of Shabbos and Chagiga. Shenivron kodem briat haolam ha'itiyi, created before this world. So he has no problem with the development, so to speak, of humankind, prehistoric man, Neanderthal, etc., etc. He has no problem with that. And Adam was the creation of a human being with that strong spiritual component, with that neshama, as opposed to human beings that, in terms of all animals are alive, and we say what they have is a ruach chaim, a spirit of life. A human being has a ruach chaim, and also besides the physical body with its own ruach chaim, there is a separate spiritual being. Vayitzer, Hashem Elokim et Adam, it says Vayitzer, 2 yuds. That is a double formation. We are a double, not a double agent, but a double creation of a physical being and a spiritual being. And when the Ruach Chaim leaves, and that physical body then reaches its demise, at that point, according to our teachings, and there's been much written about this, Life After Life by Dr. Moody, of people who have their near-death experiences and they feel themselves being lifted up off their body, watching what's happening to their body from above. That is unique to human beings, and that, he says, is what came about at a later point. And that's the point where the Torah is kicking in. So that Adam and Chava were not necessarily the very first human, Homo sapiens. I don't know. I don't want to go into scientific names. I don't know what each one is called. Human beings, but they were the first human beings who had this added spiritual self that was combined with the physical self. Adam was merely the first human being created in the latest cycle. According to these opinions, it would seem that man already had the physical and mental capacities that we possess, as early as 974 generations before Adam, or some, however many it would be, 25,000 years ago. Yes, Janet, you wanted to say something before?
So approach 3 and the multiple worlds, the way these sages are stating it implies that Hashem isn't omniscient because he didn't know how it was going to come out. And later, only after he saw how it came out, he said, I don't like it.
Unless that was all part of the plan, which is how we'd have to understand it. For whatever reason, the plan was stage, this. The same way that we understand this world was created in stages. That was also part of the stages. Why? Nonprofit. Steve, you were first.
Well,
Steve.
Maybe that was my question.
Okay.
Because if Hashem is perfect and his creation is perfect.
So ask the question by the flood.
Well, the people were evil and they needed to be.
So the world was not as. Yeah.
Right. But it doesn't make sense to me because the sun's created in that same cycle of this world. So how did you have those previous worlds if they didn't have a sun? In other words, it seems like
they had, but he destroyed it.
Yeah, right. Or it's talking about, there are those that look at it that there was the original creation and now we zoom into present time for this last iteration. I'm not sure. That's an interesting point you're bringing up. Yes, Chris.
Well, I see that approach 2 and 3 are compatible in the sense that approach 2 is about the universe in itself, and it's currently expanding. We know that scientifically. It's continuing to expand from the Big Bang. But the thing is the worlds that we see through telescopes today, like the James Webb, that we see around the whole universe, and it is expanding, is that there are different worlds. So that do you see? I see that's compatible, and we are taking samples from Mars. And
right, but this is saying that that our planet had different iterations, and that's what we're finding within.
What I'm saying is that there probably was a different iteration, but someplace else in another part of the universe.
Yeah. Look, there is. Right, Kaplan writes elsewhere. If we would find life on another planet, would that all of a sudden shake our belief? And he says, on the contrary, he said there are many teachings of the sages about the world to come. There'll be all this going on, that going on. There'll be people coming from elsewhere. Who knows?
But we're noticing like when Mars, we've taken samples and we're seeing that there's certain elements and minerals and water that were on there. But
which would indicate the possibility of life.
Correct. And so the chance,
See, my problem, not problem with all of that, but the conundrum I have with all of that is whenever we're searching for life, and let's go back to what I said before, that we can only imagine things within our realm of experience and things within our realm, right? So we're always looking for life. What are we looking for? Carbon. Carbon is the building block of life because I think atomically carbon has the way that it can combine with the greatest valence, right? The valence, right? Carbon has the greatest valence, so it can combine with so many different, right? So we're always looking for carbon. So what are we always looking for? We're always looking for life as we know it. But who knows? Who knows if there's life beyond the way life as we know it? But we're always locked into our perception, our experiences, and we can't even imagine beyond that. Yeah. Okay. Good. So I hope I have presented 3 pathways, and which one, or is it a hybrid? Is it who knows, right? But again, the way I navigate my way through this world as a believing person who also accepts science is give me options.
How do we know that we will ultimately know?
I'm sorry?
How do we know that we will ultimately know?
I think, I don't know, I think that once we will leave this world and no longer be bound by the limits of this world, then there will be absolute clarity. You know, the Talmud speaks about a child before a child is born knows Kol HaTorah Kula, knows the entire Torah. And my understanding of that is that the child is in the neshama, the soul is in a spiritual realm. So it knows everything. It's only once we come down here that we have all of our confusion. And so I'm assuming this will be part of that, which will be very, very clear, right? Our understanding is we'll have a full understanding of Torah, and that will include all of this. Yes, Mr. Dove.
Mashiach's gonna clarify everything.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Yes. Okay.
Also, it's not incompatible to say that Hashem set into effect physical, natural law, physiological, and biological, biochemical processes, and kind of things flow from there as well.
I would certainly say that God set these things in motion. I would not agree, if I'm not sure this is what you're saying, that God set in motion and then whatever the heck happens.
No, well, but
Because that would be denying
the
what we call
balance-
hashgacha
but
pratis,
the balance
right?
is
Divine
always
providence and
we're
orchestration.
staying anchored in our chairs, so we don't have to like crawl through space to try and reach our sandwiches. Plants fix that carbon using gradient energy and the carbon dioxide that and give off oxygen, whereas we take in oxygen
Mhm.
and they give off carbon dioxide. So there's that meeting.
It's a beautiful, integration,
So
harmony.
And that's that order you're talking about that goes against entropy. Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah.
So it's not. I'm not
It's
saying
called a symbiotic relationship, I think.
saying that those processes, the way they're orchestrated, sort of keep everything in their niche.
Yeah, there are laws of nature, and that's why we're not being flung off of this earth as it's spinning and orbiting at the same time, and yet our water is only shaking because I shook the table. Besides that, it's not shaking at all. Yes, there are these incredible laws of nature that I believe Einstein said, we take for granted the laws of nature, but why need there? Why is it a given that there are laws of nature? Why wouldn't it just be random, right? Chaos, right? We take for granted, right? But actually, one way, going back to with this, and we'll end with this. Steve, you mentioned about Erev Boker, right? Evening and morning. Another way of understanding is there was mixture and there was clarification. So the creation were steps of seder, of order that were being put into this world. There's Erev, comes the word of Iruv, which is a big mixture. Huh? Yeah. But I'm saying Erev Boker, those words, right, also connote confusion and clarity.
What is tohu vabohu?
Void and emptiness.
But also, I think Erev and Tohu both have that idea of just
American politics.
Good seeing you. No, that goes beyond Tovu. Good seeing you, Kathy.
Not like a host.
Okay, we'll call it over here, my friends. Good.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. Yashikach, everybody.
For this week.